Okay, this morning I want to talk a little bit about the art of learning as it applies to skiing. I have been skiing now, I've been skiing for a long time, but I started actually when I was 18 years old. I didn't have the luxury of being able to ski when I was younger, like a lot of people do. I didn't come from a family that had great means, so skiing wasn't something that was an option. However, as I got older, of course, I was able to take care of myself and have my own successes, etc. So skiing became an option. When my son took up skiing more seriously through the 4th and 5th grader ski for free program in Pennsylvania, a lot of states have this, by the way, if you're not familiar with it, he was able to start skiing, and we went more frequently. And as he got better, I had to get better too, because he would get upset if I couldn't keep up with him. Now, what I want to talk about is basically a little bit about this journey that I did, because it's going to help beginners become better. But it can also help experts, even including racers, do well. Just what are my qualifications besides just having fun skiing? I initiated my career as a professor of sports psychology back in 1998 at Widener University in Chester, PA. I did my dissertation at the University of Maryland on competence beliefs in athletes. I focused on tennis players for that dissertation. So I've been studying learning, basically. Competence beliefs are a facet of learning. So I've been studying learning forever, and I'm going to continue studying learning. I believe that I am an expert learner. I've mastered the learning process. Doesn't mean that I'm great at everything, but I certainly can learn. And I love learning. So I'm very mastery oriented. People who like learning are mastery oriented, and they seek mastery opportunities and they thrive in them. Now that's different than being outcome oriented, where one is only focused on the result. Now both of those are important, but for improvement, having a mastery orientation is key. And regardless of whether one races or one is strapping on planks for the first time ever and is going to be doing a little wedging, it's the same. The learning process is the same. The underlying mechanism is exactly the same. Learning has a sequence, and the sequence involves disequilibrium, equilibrium. There are two phases to it. Disequilibrium is the negative experience one has when one realizes that one isn't where one would like to be. So, for instance, most of us, we adapt to our environments, regardless of what the environment is. And then we are hit with some information that contradicts our conceptions of self. So this is where self-concept comes in. Like, for instance, if I was to say I'm a good skier, and then somebody points out something that I do wrong, which is obvious because I do plenty of things wrong, that contradicts my conception of self. And that contradiction causes a sense of disequilibrium. Now, all of us experience this equilibrium differently. Some people might actually cry when they hear that. Some people might get angry. Some people might just say, okay, I can do something to fix this. My mastery orientation has always focused on me becoming better and wanting to improve myself. So I thrive in this equilibrium. In fact, the coach I work with in tennis, both of the coaches I work with in tennis, they tend to give me a lot of feedback about what I'm doing wrong, and that's what I want. So I take that feedback and try to use it to improve myself. Like, if, for instance, in tennis, it's more like getting my footwork is really important, moving away from the ball. In skiing, it's getting on my edges, keeping my skis, putting pressure on the correct foot, the outside ski when I'm making a turn, etc. So that's what I want to focus on today. Managing the disequilibrium to equilibrium experience. First thing, our coaches, our teachers, and those of you who are in racing, the coaches will tell you what you're doing wrong. They'll always tell you what you're doing wrong. In fact, they'll repeat the thing that you're doing wrong most frequently, right? So you'll know exactly what it is that you need to improve. And the same with somebody who's taking lessons. You're always going to hear what you're doing wrong. So you're going to take that information and build upon it. Now, I used to work with tennis players in an academy, and I'd always tell them, write goals, focus on your goals, make the goals more proximal than distal. Proximal means that they're closer to you, easier to take care of, rather than distal goals, which are like, say, I want to be a professional one day, or I want to win a race. Those are more distal goals. Proximal goals are the goals that we can actually control better. So I'd say, okay, let's focus on this like little goal, like maybe getting underneath the ball in tennis. So in skiing, I would focus on something like putting pressure on my outside ski, or bending my knees more, keeping my shins against the tongue of my boot better, right? So you always work on stuff. You're always working on things. So whether you're a beginner or you're an elite racer, there's something you can work on. Now, here's the interesting part. Learning to focus on mastery, and notice I use the word focus. Learning to focus on mastery improves one's focus. Look, I know when I do work with our Blue Mountain Racing for Adults program, the coaches tell me what I'm doing wrong all the time, of course. And one of the issues that I had was managing those ruts. Like when the snow's not that great, sometimes the ruts are scary. And one of the coaches said, focus on the gate, not the rut. If you focus on the rut, you'll run into the rut. And that's actually true, because you start looking at it and it becomes something that you fear, or that I fear, excuse me, and I head right towards them. So what I did was focus on the gates, and I don't even think about the ruts anymore. So that's something I had to master. So that's something that I needed to do. And by focusing on that, it eliminated my cognitions, my thoughts about anything else, right? Because so that's a perfect example, because we generally are nervous about something when we're performing, especially if we're performing in an area that's causing us disequilibrium. That disequilibrium starts becoming more salient, more prominent. So for some of us, it becomes anxiety, nerves, right? So if we go with that, it'll just destroy our ability to perform well. So focusing on whatever it is that your teacher, your coach told you to do is actually going to help you perform better. Okay, so that's what you want to do. So for instance, if I'm working with a beginner, and a beginner, like, well, even myself, when I practice beginner skills like wedging, one of the points that somebody told me recently, who was evaluating my basic skill, like when I was wedging, this is like recent, so I don't wedge ski that much anymore, but in this case, he told me that my inside ski needs to be flat against the ground, so I need to release some of the pressure off of it, so I can negotiate the wedge turn better. Okay, so that's something that, guess what? When I started doing wedge skiing, I focused on that. Okay, similarly, when I'm skiing, just regular skiing somewhere, and my son's a much better skier than I am, he'll tell me, you're not leaning enough. That's why you're not getting enough of you're not edging enough or carving. So I started leaning more, and wow, he said, wow, look at that, you're carving. I'm like, wow, I remember that was a couple years ago, and that was awesome. So whenever I ski now, in addition to enjoying the environment, my focus is on mastering those skills that I need to master in order to become a better skier. So by doing that, I become way more focused, I perform better, and I actually experience something that I talk a lot about in my research with learning, and that's the Oceanic Feeling. This is a term that was discussed by many, including Freud, who discussed it himself in one of his books, Civilization and Its Discontents. The Oceanic Feeling is that flow experience that one has. It's a very vast experience where one's sense of self blends in with nature. So there's no boundary to who you are and what you are not. So everything blends together. I know it sounds very metaphysical, but it is part of metaphysics. So that happens more frequently when one is focused on the here and now. And the here and now for a skier is practicing exactly what she was told to do while skiing, right? And if one does that, one eliminates all these other thoughts and one is more apt to experience the oceanic feeling. So that's something that one should strive for. Okay, so what's the point of this whole discussion today? Let's try to summarize this. Number one, try to have a mastery orientation rather than an outcome orientation. Unless you're the most elite athlete in the world, you're going to want to focus more on learning than just performance. But even the elites, even Lindsey Vonn needs to do that. I mean, with all the accidents she's been having lately, I'm wondering if she needs to focus more on mastery rather than performance. It's concerning. How do you get your mastery orientation? Take all the skills that were suggested to you by your coaches or your teachers and practice those. Instead of just ski with intent to master those experiences. Have somebody else evaluate you and say, look, watch me and tell me if I'm doing this, because you want that disequilibrium. You want to make that part of your life. You want to continually feel that, get feedback to see where you're at. Eventually somebody's going to say, hey, you're edging, or you're hitting the gates correctly, and you won't have to worry about that. Then you go to the next challenge. Okay, so keep that mastery orientation. Stay focused on those activities. If it helps, write them down on a piece of paper as proximal goals. You should also write down your distal goal. Like, what do you want to be? Like, if I'm talking to a junior who wants to get a college scholarship and race for the USCSA, United States College Ski and Snowboarding Association, if you want to do that, then fine, get a scholarship. Awesome, that's a distal goal, but you can't reach that distal goal unless you take care of your proximal goals. And learn to embrace the disequilibrium. In fact, I love it. I teach all the time. There's times when I get nervous too, and I just sit there, and I embrace it. I love it. When somebody asks me something, or there's a topic that it's kind of like I'm wishy-washy on, I'm just learning it. I love that disequilibrium. I sit there and I just embrace it. So embrace the discomfort, and then move on. Okay, I'll make more videos like this for performance with time. But anyway, I wish everybody a good day and go out and ski and have some fun. All right, bye.